everybody. Welcome to the Ozark Radio Hour, brought to you by the Eureka Springs Independent and the Inside Straight and Thanatopsis Club. I'm Richard Pille.
And I'm Ken Crow, and we're your hosts for about an hour of purely organic radio. Not always perfect, but always fresh, always honest, and always local.
And I'm Jeremiah Alvarado, the program's new producer and the key man in organizing and supervising the Ozark Radio Hour's transition to a new platform based at the Eureka Springs Independent.
Jeremiah, what's this transition you're talking about going to look like? Why are we doing it?
Well, later in the program, we're all going to sit down for a little bit and talk about it. But to answer your first question, we're doing it to accomplish a goal at the ESI, which is to become a full-fledged media company to include podcasts, film, and other media in addition to the weekly newspaper, The Independent. And that'll give our audience and advertisers even broader coverage and fulfill the Ozark Radio Hour's original mission of truly being always fresh, always local, and always honest by reaching a bigger audience.
Well, that sounds interesting, Jeremiah. Let me assure our audience that Mr. Richard Pille and I will continue to brighten your week on our new show and format. But before we move on, we got a couple of letters from listeners, Richard.
Right, you are, Kent. Ernest Leonard from Vientiane, Laos, writes, I thought it was pretty funny the way you guys characterized the Razorbacks team as a made-up of illiterates and felons. As a USC graduate, that's my general impression of the SEC as a whole. But you made me laugh out loud, although I'm not sure your listeners got the same fun out of it as I did. And thanks to Susie Q for her NFL story. It made me miss being back in the States in football season. Jeremiah, how about Ernest's remarks about the Razorbacks? Is the new show going to allow us to make fun of them?
Not in a million years. Every player on the Razorback team, at least first string, is a born-again Christian washed in the blood of the Lamb, is a scholar, entirely law-abiding, and is a guy who absolutely loves his mother. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But let's move along, shall we?
Well, we can do that, but Jerry Morris from Wanpaca, Wisconsin writes, thanks to Sharon Laborde for telling your audience about Donald Harrington. We'll be planning on relocating to the Eureka Springs area next spring, and it was helpful to hear about a writer who writes about the old-time culture of the Ozarks. I was able to get The Cockroaches of Staymore, one of Harrington's books that is actually quite well known, off Amazon, and so far I've enjoyed it. Jerry and Ernie, thanks for listening and for writing in. We appreciate you. And now, Mr. Pille, what's happening on the show today?
Well, Jeremiah and Dan have figured out a few things, and we're going to actually, you and I, be allowed into the conversation. And we're going to see what the hell is going on with this transition with the program and all of that stuff, and see if you and I still have a job. And then Dan traveled up to Fort Scott, Kansas, which is pretty close by, about 2.5 hours, I think, and visited Gordon Parks Museum and the Cultural Center, and interviewed the director about Gordon Parks. And are you two guys familiar with Gordon Parks?
He was a filmmaker and photographer, right?
I think he was, and I think he was the first African-American photographer for Life Magazine and Vogue, and he produced and directed the first mainstream Hollywood movie starring black actors. It was called Shaft.
Yeah, I remember that. Richard Roundtree was the cop. Isaac Hayes did the soundtrack. The soundtrack was a big hit. Anybody that liked to dance was certainly around that. It was a lot of fun, man.
Shaft was cool.
But, you know, everything was fun in 1971. Jeremiah, where were you in 1971?
Well, I was enjoying rock and roll in the ether, waiting so that I could one day emerge, get a job, and support old people on Social Security.
Everything was fun in 1971?
I don't really know for sure.
I know you wouldn't remember it, but you weren't riding shotgun with me in 71.
No, I wasn't. What else is going on?
He was waiting to emerge?
I know, I don't even want to start.
Yeah, the twinkle in his old man's eye, I know that.
Well, at least he's working and paying our Social Security.
Okay, well.
I like that part.
It looks like Sharon Laborde is also on the show today and talks about going to school. her daddy's experience as a coroner, and shares an invitation to all the creative spirits here in the Ozarks. And T.Racy Johnson does an encore presentation of Cowgirls Train Set. Well, let's hear from Jeremiah and Dan about our new program format and schedule.
So I'm allowed to appear on the air, at least for the very last time.
Well, that's why we left it unlocked for you, Dan.
Let you out of the control booth again, much to our chagrin.
Well, Jeremiah and I have been working diligently over the past month or so to facilitate this transition from Ozark Radio Hour to a new format that is based on a Eureka Springs Independent platform. Jeremiah, unveil the new name.
All right. Well, we will be known as Olio Radio of the Ozarks.
Olio Radio.
Olio Radio?
Explain Olio.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't Olio a margin?
Instead of butter. Use that instead of butter, right?
Yeah.
I thought they took that off the market because it gave us all cancer.
I think so.
See, that was my immediate reaction too. I thought, my
so
goodness.
What is the definition of Olio?
Well,
and so
Olio,
we're making this transition from being fresh, local, and honest.
And now it's going to be stanky, worn out,
buttery and
greasy
smooth.
Olio.
And it tastes just like butter, I guess.
Well,
okay. Well, Jeremiah, there's obviously a generational gap here. So please explain yourself. What does Olio mean?
Well, the definition of Olio is a miscellaneous collection of items or things.
So it doesn't have anything to do with fake butter.
Well, no, that's exactly what fake butter is.
Leftover petroleum products.
But isn't it fun to say Olio Radio?
It is fun.
Well,
I like that. Olio.
It drips trippingly off the tongue, I guess.
Yeah, and anyone over 60 is going to laugh their asses off at you. But no, continue. Olio Radio. Say it again. It is
Olio Radio.
A miscellaneous collection.
A miscellaneous collection. Great.
The program will definitely qualify under that definition.
Well, you've always been under the heading of miscellaneous.
What happens to fresh, local, and honest?
What do you mean by that?
What's going to be fresh about Olio Radio?
Well, hopefully the different programs that we're going to be hosting.
And how is that? You mean you don't listen to Kent and I drone on for an hour in between some nice sounding articles? Do we still have a job?
Oh, you do, but separately.
Do we start getting paid by any chance? Well, does Olio have any money? I'll call her anything she wants me to.
You know, I feel like
baby!
Olio!
I feel like we're both being sent to our separate corners.
So I think
definitely.
I think Dan's behind all of this just so he can get out of working.
I'm going to be busily engaged in back office opportunities under Jeremiah's direction. But I do know that Olio Radio is going to be open to new content producers, including young people and even high school people. Right, Jeremiah?
That's our plan.
Well, do we have a lineup of people who are going to do this yet, or are we just sort of hoping?
Oh, shooting from the hip. It's the only way to do it, Ken.
Well, I'm looking forward to a program maybe titled School of Rock with a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds who mull over the question, what does it mean to get a letter from the president that says greetings?
Well, I think it's great, the whole idea of it. We talked about and did nothing about involving the high schools in our listening area and local high schools. And not one of us actually got off our butt and went over to the high school and involved the tech classes or the theater classes or any of that.
No,
so
wait a minute.
You didn't go, did you?
Well, no, I wasn't supposed to. We gave you that job.
Well, no wonder it didn't get done.
That's what I thought.
But Jeremiah, you have some ideas about visiting the East Lab, for example, right?
Yeah.
What is the East Lab?
EAST stands for Environmental and Spatial Technologies, and the point of EAST was and is to really get involved in community efforts and activities, kind of a form of activism in a way. You know, get active, help the community evolve and grow. And it used to be that, you know, back before I was in high school.
East Lab sounds great, but in spite of curmudgeon over here.
Friends in Radio Land, I want you to know that he was pointing toward Kent and not towards me. All right?
Well,
it was a general wave of the hand. Needless conversation about this. It's a great idea. I'm really excited about the transition. Usually transition for people Kent and Dan's age means their picture on the obituary page. So transition in any other form is going to be really great.
Oh, this could be progress.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
You know,
I think it's a great idea.
You know, everybody says that we all want progress, but none of us want change.
I know. It's horrible, isn't it? Jeremiah, how are you feeling about taking on Olio Radio in this new obligation?
Scared all the way to hell, but it'll be fun.
Fantastic. Energy.
Well, I don't think you should be at all nervous about this, Jeremiah, because really, when you think about it, I mean, what's at stake? We're not making any money. None of us is getting paid. Nobody's going to kick us off the air. Nobody can fire us. Why be scared?
Actually, Jeremiah is disagreeing with at least one of your ticking points there. But
which one?
I think it was about the one about being fired, right?
Yeah.
You're on notice, Your Honor.
Hey, fire me.
Well, no.
It's happened before.
I'm worried that I'm going to get fired.
You're not going to get out of it this easy.
Okay, Jeremiah is worried about being fired. I can assure you, Jeremiah, that you will not get fired.
I hope not.
I promise.
All right.
They will call that quitting.
And
if you're no longer involved, it won't be firing. It'll be you quit.
Yeah, and if you do get fired, I'll give you a job as my yard boy. It'll give you an opportunity to stand between me and my wife and learn what I've endured for the last 30 years.
I don't want to do that, Dan.
Oh, wait, that could be a great life lesson.
Could I take that job?
You've always wanted to be between someone.
Never mind. Don't go there.
Well, anyway, it sounds like it's going to be quite an adventure.
It sounds like it's going to be fun, and looking forward to see what happens. Who knows what danger lurks?
Yeah. So, friends, for the next
in the hearts of Olios.
For the next few weeks, we'll be simultaneously running the program on Ozark Radio Hour's website and on the Eureka Springs Independent's website. So you'll be able to access the program in both places. And then, as I said, after a couple of weeks working the bugs out and so on, we'll transition entirely over to the Eureka Springs Independent's website and become Olio Radio, the voice of the Ozarks?
Of the Ozarks.
Of the Ozarks. All right. And Jeremiah, what is the address of the Eureka Springs Independent's website?
Eureka.news.
All right. And how can our listeners contact you?
Well, they can email me at esipressrelease@gmail.com.
Say that again, please.
esipressrelease@gmail.com.
Okay. If someone is interested in producing a program for Olio Radio, how do they go about that?
Well, they'll just have to contact me, and we'll talk about it, and they'll have to submit a demo, and also be ready to adhere to a schedule.
Okay. And is there any cost to them for putting a program on?
No, I don't. No, there will not be. But no, there will not be a cost for it.
Well,
it'll just be if the only price will be is that you're excited.
I'm excited. So, Jeremiah, one time before we change topics here, one more time, what is your email address?
esipressrelease@gmail.com.
Okay. You didn't know you were going to have to audition again, did you?
I didn't.
Oh.
That Olio Radio, we're going to have the floor in the studio changed to linoleum.
We're not doing Olio over my rug.
I'm telling you, it could be very exciting.
It could be.
Right.
Well, folks,
what else is going on?
Yeah. Well, next up is an interview with Jill Warford, director of the Gordon Parks Museum and Cultural Center in Fort Scott, Kansas. So we're looking forward to this interview with Dan, who ventured into the Netherlands of Fort Scott, out there on the edge of the prairie.
Our guest today on the Ozark Radio Hour is Jill Warford, who is the executive director of the Gordon Parks Museum at the Fort Scott Community College in Fort Scott, Kansas. Jill Warford, welcome to Ozark Radio.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Before we really jump into lots of other sorts of questions, tell our audience briefly, if you will, who Gordon Parks was.
Well, Gordon Parks was a very famous photographer. He was the first African-American photographer for Life magazine. He was also a filmmaker. He also wrote music. He also wrote over 20 books, and he even did a ballet. So he was this multi-talented genius who came from Fort Scott, Kansas.
My goodness.
Yes.
Right. When was Gordon Parks born?
He was born 1912 in Fort Scott. He was the youngest of 15 kids.
My goodness.
And he was born dead. And the doctor who came out to help had a young doctor with him named Dr. Gordon Baldwin. And he said, let's put this baby in a bucket of ice, and they did. And Gordon said, I started screaming and never quit. So his mother obviously named him. His name is Gordon Roger Alexander Buchanan Parks. So the Gordon was for Dr. Gordon Baldwin.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into talking specifically about Gordon Parks' life, give our listeners an idea of what is happening here at the Gordon Parks Museum.
Well, we have displays. We have his life, basically. We have 30 of his photographs that Gordon gave us. And then we also have just all sorts of memorabilia from his life. His suits, one of his cameras, his awards, posters of the movies. We show the movies of some of his movies, and just really it's an interpretation of his life.
And as I understand it, when you say movies, you're really talking about the kind of the Richard Roundtree Shaft movies that were so popular back in the 70s?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, he directed Shaft. He also directed The Learning Tree, which is about him growing up in Fort Scott. And, Solomon Northup's Odyssey was a movie that a couple of years ago was made into 12 Years a Slave, which was very popular. Gordon didn't do a whole lot of movies. He got a little jaded with Hollywood. The movies he did do were very, very good movies, and he did a lot of documentaries too. So,
and I understand that you knew Gordon Parks personally, right?
Yes, I did. I grew up in Fort Scott, so I always, when I became, after I was 10 or 12, I became aware that somebody kind of famous was from Fort Scott. And then when I was 12, they filmed The Learning Tree here, and I would ride my bike down to one of the locations. It was just a couple of blocks away, and I would just watch, and I was kind of enamored with what was going on, though I didn't really understand it or know what was going on. But then some of my friends got to be extras in the movie, and so it became a little bit more real. And I think when I was a teenager, I started reading some of his books, and I would read his autobiographies, and it was just always neat to realize that somebody famous was from my hometown. So then I met Gordon. I was at a theater festival. I directed a theater festival and in Independence, Kansas, and we had him as a guest one year. And from that point on, I just thought, boy, Fort Scott needs to do something for its native son. And I I got an opportunity to move back here. And gosh, it's been 13 years now that we've had the Gordon Parks, the museum, not this new building we've been in since 2009, but we've had the Gordon Parks celebration. And Gordon's last visit was here in 2004. So though he didn't ever see this building or this museum, he knew what we were working towards. So,
well, I know a little bit about Gordon Parks from my time of living in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Yes.
And I know Gordon spent some time up there as a young man.
He did. He left Fort Scott at 16 years old. His mother died. She wanted him to move to Minneapolis because she felt like there were more opportunities. So he moved up there to live with a sister. Well, he didn't get along with his brother-in-law, and so he was kicked out of the house. And so from 16 years old on, he lived on his own, which is pretty remarkable. He tried to go back to high school and finish high school twice, and he didn't do that. But over the course of his career, his lifetime, he received over 50 honorary doctorates.
My goodness.
Yeah, from places like Yale and Princeton and different places. So he was very much a self-educated person. And several years ago, some people from Fort Scott took his high school diploma with his, for him from Fort Scott High School. And he was very, very pleased to get that, all those years later, but it meant a lot to him.
You bet. How did Gordon Parks become a photographer?
Well, I read back through his autobiographies because I wanted to know that myself. And he was on the railroad. He was a porter on the railroad, and he ran back and forth from Minneapolis and Chicago to Seattle. So he started noticing things, and he noticed magazines that people would leave behind. And of course, Life magazine was, very popular. And then when he was on one end of the road or the other, he would go to the newsreels that they would show during the movies. And one day they had a famous photographer there, and Gordon became very interested. And so he bought a camera. It was called a Voigtlander Brilliant. And he said, I think I was more in love with the name of it than anything else. But he bought this camera. He started taking photographs. And when he was in Seattle, he took it out to the Eastman Kodak place, and they developed, and they said, you have real talent.
Wow.
Keep going. And so he did. And that's kind of how he started. And he started really in fashion photography. In St. Paul, he got a job as a fashion photographer for a big department store. And then Marva Lewis, Joe Lewis's wife, knew about him, and she started asking him to take photographs and so he got in with the Society Women in Minneapolis, and that's really how he started. And from there, he got a fellowship and decided to go to Washington, D.C. and worked for the Farm Security Administration. And so from that point, then it led to Life magazine, and that was a big first for him.
Yes, and as you said, he was the first African-American photographer for Life magazine.
For Life magazine.
Yeah. Was that a big deal then?
Yeah, 1948. Yeah, it was a pretty big deal, and he did a lot of photography for Life, a lot of movie stars' pictures and things like that, because Life was kind of the People magazine of today, So, and then he started doing serious pieces, and he says one of our quotes on the wall here in the museum. He says, "I chose my camera as a weapon against all the things I dislike about America: poverty, racism, and discrimination." So that is kind of the crux of Gordon's life as a photographer. He really did show a lot of, he showed the world a lot of the things that people probably didn't want to look at and want to face.
At what time did Parks become famous?
Wow, I've never been asked that question. That's a great question. I think probably after the Learning Tree, because it was a first too. He he was the first African American to direct a major Hollywood studio film. There had been other black directors, Oscar Micheaux and people like that, but he was the first to get a Hollywood film, and so it was received well. It was put on the Library of Congress National Registry, and then I think when he directed Shaft, that was a huge hit.
And it was, well, a lot of our listeners are way too young to remember Shaft. So tell folks what Shaft was about.
Shaft was about a black cop who was he was hip, he was cool. Richard Roundtree played him, and he was the first time a detective like that had been portrayed by a black man.
Right.
So it was a really important movie, and everybody of that generation knew Shaft because of the music so much, Gordon, his son came to his apartment in New York and he goes, Dad, you got to come down to Times Square. There were circles around the block wanting to see Shaft. And we had Richard Roundtree here one year.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I said, do you ever get tired of speaking somewhere and they play the music to Shaft? And he goes, no, I love that music. I think I'd like it too, if that's how they introduced me all the time. But yeah,
that was one of the first mainstream Hollywood productions that really featured African Americans in starring roles.
Yeah,
that's quite remarkable.
It really is.
And of course, I remember seeing it when I was younger. Let me say that.
Yeah.
And it was.
I know.
I'd never seen anything like it.
And there's been a remake, which is really not as good as the original, but maybe younger people would remember because it was made by John Singleton. And in the very opening scene, there's some men sitting around a table, and it's Gordon and Richard Roundtree and some other people from the first movie.
I know that Parks had tremendous professional success as a photographer, as a filmmaker, as a writer. And later in life, he actually became kind of a man about town. And
he did.
Sort of a fashion model and a very good friend with Gloria Vanderbilt. Right?
He was, yes. Yes, we found this crazy picture that had he and I believe Gloria Vanderbilt and that little kid actor named Mason somebody and Andy Warhol. And so I thought, boy, he was, at a time, he was kind of, like you say, he was the man about town. He was cool. And yes, he and Gloria Vanderbilt had a long time love affair, and she wanted to marry him. And Gordon always said no. He thought that their backgrounds were too different. And Gordon was a ladies' man.
I bet he was.
He was married 3 times, and he just. When
you met him, did he strike you as one of those very elegant, kind of wonderful, reserved but very charming guys?
Yes, he had a ton of charisma. I mean, he just did. He was just one of those people that had a lot of charisma, but he was still very down to earth, I thought. I mean, he was still just Gordon Parks from Fort Scott, Kansas. But yes, he had a ton of charisma. I remember I was in New York to see him once, and we attended this event up at Harlem, and all the kids on the street and people, it was a busy area of town, and they were, hey, Gordon, hey, Mr. Parks, And I thought, wow, he's 90-some years old, and he's still...
They still know it.
He's still got it.
Great. Well, Jill, before we go, tell folks a bit about the Gordon Parks Museum here at Fort Scott Community College.
Well, the Gordon Parks Museum, we actually were the Gordon Parks Center, and I was in, a small office, then a little bit bigger, and then the back of the library. And when we built our new Fine Arts Center in 2009, we wrote a grant to the Kresge Foundation, and it got funded at the tune of $900,000. So, so we were able to include this in the new Fine Arts Center, and it's 3,000 square foot, and it's we get visitors from all over the place, you know, and it's a great museum if you really are a Gordon Parks fan. But even if you're not, it's we've got some great displays, and a lot of Gordon's life is in here.
And you go through. I see photographs all around me, starting out with his very early life here in Fort Scott, and then in Minneapolis, and then as he traversed around the world, and then right before me, later in life, I see pictures of him with President Reagan, copies of the covers of his books, and all of those things.
There's a lot to take in, and you know, we have Gordon's National Medal of Art that he got from from President Reagan.
Wow.
And it's we have his desk. We just have so many personal things, you know. Wichita State, we're so glad that they bought his papers, and they have his scholarly life, but we have his personal life. So people should go out to Wichita, but they should also come here, because this is a great tribute to Gordon, and it's, you know, it's so fitting that it should be in his hometown of Fort Scott.
Good. Well, Jill, what are the hours of operation?
The hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but we do put on the website that I'm a one-person shop, so there are times where the museum has to be closed. So I always say, you know, if you know you're going to come and you're coming from far away, just give us a call or email us and let us know, so that we're here and that we, you know, I'd hate somebody to come from far away and not be able to get in.
Sure. And what is the address of your website?
www.gordonparkscenter.org. And our email is gordonparkscenter@fortscott.edu. So.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Jill Warford, Executive Director of the Gordon Parks Center in Fort Scott, Kansas, thank you so much for being on the Ozark Radio Hour.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad that Gordon Parks Center is so close by. Just head north towards Kansas City and turn left for a couple miles on Highway 54, in about 2.5 hours. And I enjoyed learning about Parks, although I have no idea who Gloria Vanderbilt is. Next is Sharon Laborde, and welcome to the conversation. Now here's Sharon.
Welcome to the conversation. This is Sharon Laborde. For those listeners joining the conversation for the first time as we launch our new format, you are most welcome, and your participation and involvement are an integral part of the program. In the past, my official title has been cultural editor, and I suppose that description is an accurate one. But the purpose of the program, at least as I see it, is to not only look at the arts, but at times express personal opinions and reflections about life in the Ozarks and life in general, no matter where we find ourselves. In other words, social issues are not excluded from the conversations on this program. Part of who we are as a society here in the mountains, and no doubt reflects similar points of view across the country. American culture is, after all, in constant flux, and what happens in other parts of our country, and the world for that matter, are valid topics for discussion. So from time to time, I may deviate from the rarefied air of writers and artists from Northwest Arkansas and Southwest Missouri. In fact, personal reflections on any topic of interest will always be welcome, and I invite listeners to share comments and opinions and take part in the program. I would enjoy interviewing a variety of people who have a message to share. Welcome to the Conversation is open for business and welcomes you and your ideas. I was pleased this week to receive a press release from Loretta Crenshaw, director of the Eureka Springs Library, about the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, and learned that several local children have successfully completed reading an amazing number of books, and as a result have found they can read. What an accomplishment. As an educator, I'm constantly reminding my high school students of the benefits of sustained silent reading and require them to always have a library book with them when they come to my class. This is, I'm proud to say, supported by my school district, especially since we have a significant number of students whose native language isn't English. For some, it's a struggle, and reading as much and as often as possible is one of the best ways for these students to be successful. School starts in mid-August here in Northwest Arkansas, but September is the month when things really get into full swing. Some of you may remember the days when all schools started after Labor Day, the good old days, with a real 3-month summer vacation. Yes, September and the start of school makes me feel nostalgic. My dear father always took such pride in what Mother and I had purchased for my back-to-school wardrobe. I had to have Basswegian loafers and A-line skirts for school. It's in September that I miss my father the most. It's his birthday month as well. If he were still with us, he would be 99 this year. He loved good clothes, coats especially, and even though it rarely gets very cold in my home state, Daddy always had a long wool overcoat. One of my favorite stories about him took place one cold winter when he was deputy coroner of Jefferson County, Alabama. In the days before the coroner had to be a medical doctor, he had been called in the middle of the night to investigate a death. I was still in high school at the time and wondered when I got up where he was. Mother said he was out on a call, but before long, as I was eating breakfast, he came home, looking exhausted and cold. "Hello, baby," he said. I realized there was something different about his appearance and suddenly realized he wasn't wearing a coat. "Daddy," I exclaimed, "where's your new overcoat?" "Oh, I found a man who needed it more than I did." I could tell he was too tired to talk. He drank his coffee and had breakfast before I left for school. Late that afternoon, Mother told me he had been called to a house fire where there had been a fatality. An elderly black man had barely escaped on that cold night, wearing only his pajamas. His wife of many years was not able to get out. Mother said Daddy put his new coat on the old man. He had lost everything and was so cold and distressed that it was the only thing Daddy could think to do. My father, like so many others of the greatest generation, wasn't a saint, but he was a good man. Rest in peace. I hope as we enjoy a glorious fall and prepare for the winter to come, you will remember and share some of your thoughts and family stories with us on Welcome to the Conversation. I look forward to hearing from you. Please email me at publisher@cahabapress.com. That's publisher@CAHABAPRESS.com. Until next time, this is Sharon Laborde.
Thank you, Sharon. You'll be able to catch the new and expanded Sharon Laborde show without Richard and I, or Richard and me, or without me and Richard. Messing up the content on ESI's new podcast link at ESI's website. And before we go to T.Racy Johnson, you don't know who Gloria Vanderbilt is?
What? I don't. Is that a problem?
Do you know Anderson Cooper?
Yes.
Guess what? That's her son.
Yeah, okay.
All right?
Yes, I do realize that now. Wow.
Fascinating woman, and if you ever look at a history of Gloria Vanderbilt, she became one of the richest people in the world when she was about 6 or 7 years old. She was a media superstar as a little girl, and it never stopped. So,
wow. She was a powerful woman ahead of her time.
And Anderson Cooper recently did a really interesting documentary with he and Gloria, his mother, and reminisced about Gloria's life and what it was like to grow up in that environment, and talked about his brother and his brother's suicide and what happened to his father. A really, really interesting,
I'll have to check it out.
Piece. Fascinating woman. All right. And speaking of fascinating women, here's T.Racy Johnson with an encore presentation of her program featuring Cowgirls Train Set, which we're rerunning because the band has some local talent in it and because they're so darn good.
Hi everyone, I hope you all had a really great week. I know I got to catch some good music, and I'm going to share with you today a band called Cowgirls Train Set. That's plural. Cowgirls is with an S. They wanted me to make sure everybody knew that. It's a possessive, meaning that they themselves are not cowgirls. They're more like the train set that gets pushed around by cowgirls, I suppose. I'd like to get started going right into one of their songs. This is called Toes in Mud. It's a really catchy tune. And after this, we're going to learn a little bit more about Cowgirls Train Set.
Seen the stars in the sky, watch the hills and trees unfurled. Felt the wind on my face, seen all the colors of the world. But I don't wanna tell a lie this time, or rearrange the stories inside. Think of all the places we could run and hide. No, I don't wanna tell a lie this time, 'cause all I need is right before my eyes. Got nothing left to do, nothing left to find. Put my feet in the grass and wiggle toes in the mud. Ran out into a storm and caught a million lightning bugs. But I don't wanna tell a lie this time, or rearrange the stories inside. Think of all the places we could run and hide. No, I don't wanna tell a lie this time, 'cause all I need is right before my eyes. Got nothing left to do, nothing left to find. Feet in the grass, wiggle toes in the mud. Ran out into a storm and caught a million lightning bugs. But I don't wanna tell a lie this time, rearrange the stories inside. Think of all the places we could run and hide. No, I don't wanna tell a lie this time, 'cause all I need is right before my eyes. Got nothing left to do, nothing left to find.
Cowgirls Train Set is out of Lawrence, Kansas. There are 6 fellas in the band, one of which is newcomer Daniel Coy. Danny Coy is a local Eureka Springs fella. He also does some electrician work in the area, so if you see him out and about, please make sure you say hello and let him know you heard some of his music. There's also Albert, Chris, and Charles. We have on lead vocals Hank. He goes back and forth while playing stand-up bass and shares vocals with Mike. These guys are all family men, so they don't really tour too far away from Lawrence, Kansas. I do hope they come back to our area very soon because it was a really fun show to watch. I hope to see you all out there too. Why? Well, because music is medicine for our souls, and it feels really good to be out at a live show. If you like what you're hearing, you can go to cowgirlstrainset.com. Don't forget, Cowgirls is plural. At that webpage, you can check out all of their upcoming shows as well as albums for sale. And we're going to listen to another song by Cowgirls Train Set. This is called Monster Truck Master. I really like this one. I hope you enjoy their music. We'll see you all here next week. Until then, happy trails, safe travels. Thank you so much for listening to us again here at Ozark Radio Hour.
My son, lend me your ear. Listen close so you may hear the legend of the monster truck. He was a man from Kansas land who played guitar with his 2 hands until his time came up. I saw him in the pecan grove when I was but 15 years old, and I've never felt the same. His hands were fast, his eyes were sharp, he blazed like lightning in the dark. He could make you feel the pain. But Mr. Armstrong ain't gonna play that song for me again, because his spirit's finally been set free. I can see you at the bar drinking whiskey. Kirk, the ghost of the monster truck is guiding me. It follows me. I yelled my throat hoarse at the bar while you played songs on your guitar. The crowd, they always wanted more. You ripped it up, you took a bow. The audience, they yelled and howled until you played your last encore. But Mr. Armstrong ain't gonna play that song for me again, because his spirit's finally been set free. I can hear you sing and drink lots of whiskey in the morning. The ghost of the monster truck is come for me. It's come for me. To me, don't let that fire stop burning. Soon it will be my time to fly. Although you died on my birthday, you blazed the trail, showed me the way, and I will play my songs until I die. But Mr. Armstrong ain't gonna play that song for me again, because his spirit's finally been set free. Maybe someday you and I will meet again. The ghost of the monster truck is guiding me. Is guiding me. Now it's time to spread the word of all the things that you have heard of the legend of the monster truck.
Thank you, T.Racy. Kent, you're going to begin providing issue-specific information in the new format, I understand, that voters will need to know in order to make informed voting choices in our upcoming elections.
Yes, and I think one of the issues is about how we get to smoke marijuana next year, right?
Well, not exactly, Jeremiah. There's a couple of initiatives on the ballot for marijuana. Medical marijuana, to be specifically. In addition to that, there's going to be, I think, 7 specific pieces of proposed legislation that voters are going to get to decide on. But speaking of marijuana, I have not read both initiatives completely. The first one I have read. It is very somewhat limited. We're looking at legislation, if it is passed, that will create marijuana dispensaries around the state. And if it passes, you would see a marijuana dispensary for approximately every 40 pharmacies that are located in the state. Those pharmacies will be entitled to sell marijuana that is grown, tested through an independent laboratory. Now, the legislation is a little bit foggy or gray when it comes to how the growing operations are actually going to be taking place or who's going to be licensed to do that. The Arkansas Department of Health is the agency that would be responsible for establishing the regulations to implement the new law. But one of the provisions of the law is that if you live more than 40 miles from a dispensary and you are provided with a doctor's prescription, you would be permitted to raise as many as 10 marijuana plants of your own for your own use. So the door is not open to just anybody raising marijuana or using it for recreational purposes under that legislation. The second piece of legislation, as I understand it, and as I said, I haven't read it, is a little more liberal with regard to the growing provisions of the marijuana. And there are a lot of people who favor or seem to be favoring that particular piece of legislation. So it's going to be really interesting. Governor Hutchison and some doctors, those guys standing behind him in white coats, have announced that this is not, in fact, something that Arkansas should be doing because there is no benefit, according to them, medicinally with marijuana. Certainly on the opposite side of a lot of other medical providers and organizations who have found that there are benefits to marijuana for medical purposes. So that's going to be really interesting. Another interesting facet of that is if one or both of these pass, well, let me back up. If both of these pass, my understanding is that the one that receives the most votes would then become the one that would be law. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this develops. The lines are being drawn. The camps pro and in opposition are marshaling their resources and getting ready to hit the airwaves and the media to promote their position. So it's going to be a very, very interesting issue for us in Arkansas. And a previous measure almost passed in Arkansas. It wasn't successful, but there was certainly enough of a vote there to indicate a strong possibility that this issue will pass this time.
The role of the Ozark Radio Hour and Olio Radio will be just simply to present the facts about the 7 pieces of pending legislation that voters will address in the upcoming election. Now, my only concern is that I understand that Richard Pille has volunteered to be a testing facility. Is that correct?
Well, I understand aren't there any rules in the legislation at all about sharing or, don't bogart that joint, my friend. Pass it over to me.
Okay, all right. And I can see where this is going.
Yeah, and if I may be a little bit more serious, there are other things for us to be concerned about other than marijuana laws.
Well, there are. One of the provisions on the ballot that's going to get a lot of attention, I think, is the attempt to pass legislation to put a cap on medical malpractice awards, and the legislation is going to attempt to cap the recovery at $250,000.
Now, may I interrupt, Your Honor,
Sure.
to say that once again, the Olio Radio takes no position on these matters, even though the person who will be presenting the information is probably fundamentally and aggressively opposed to caps on damages. But in any event, proceed.
I can speak to that.
We don't,
and I think I can do it objectively.
I was just going to actually champion you, Kent, in that you are always objective when it comes to the radio program, unless you're, of course, giving me grief.
Well, let me say something about this proposed legislation. This is being proposed, and it's being suggested that this is for the purposes of limiting what lawyers are paid in medical malpractice cases. Typically, lawyers will be paid a third of any settlement amount that is involved in medical malpractice. What many people don't understand is that, number one, medical malpractice lawsuits are one of the most expensive undertakings that an attorney can take on. The cost of medical experts, of records reviews, of all of the hiring of experts to testify about what was done wrong in a particular medical procedure is astronomical. And so recovering those costs is absolutely essential if anyone is ever going to challenge the medical profession. It's, I think, important to know that our doctors and hospitals kill more than 25 or 30,000 people a year through medical malpractice. And if lawyers are not able to recover enough money to make this worth their while, nobody is going to challenge the medical profession. So, while you may think that certain individuals have an interest in it, let me say that if this passes, patients who are injured or killed by the medical profession won't be able to find a lawyer that'll touch it. Medical providers, and guess what? The insurance companies will be very, very happy.
Well, Kent, our listeners need to hear this information, and I'm delighted that Olio Radio is going to present the facts.
There are those other 5 important issues, from term limits to casino gambling, to consider as well. And I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted when it comes to the casino gambling. One of the reasons is that we have seen casino issues in states like Mississippi and other areas fail miserably and result in a lot of problems for the areas in which they were provided for. So,
Kent, define failure. What do you mean that they have failed? Failed to deliver on their promises?
Well, they have done that because often the promises are that the revenues from the casinos are also going to go to support schools. And they haven't been able to produce the results that they promised at one point in time. And when I say fail, I mean literally some of them closed.
Many of the casinos, Tunica, they don't have the gamblers anymore. When they opened, they opened with a rush, and there's an old joke about all the tribes having casinos, and that the only tribe that really ever made any money was the Gambino tribe.
Mm-hmm. Well, may I say, Richard, that my tribe, the Roman Catholics, taught your tribe to play bingo. And as a result, we have this massive Native American gambling industry today.
Yeah, somehow...
And you haven't thanked me for that.
You know, you've always been such a linear person. I think you've skipped a few steps.
You know, what I've always wanted to do was audit the Catholic Church.
Oh, my!
The Catholic Church owns more motel rooms than any other entity in the world.
They own a lot of turf, I'll tell you what. Anyway, but, you know, and some of the casinos also have been responsible for a lot of sociological and economic problems in the particular areas where they were established. And there's just an awful lot that goes into it. And I'm not sure that, you know, we want to undertake dealing with those kinds of problems. On the other hand, there is the possibility that casinos would bring some economic benefit to some areas and to some people. It may be the Gambinos, but, you know.
Well, I look forward to having these conversations with you, Kent, as we go forward.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get a little more in-depth about it and look at some of the ups and downs and black and whites of these issues.
Well, perfect. And now is the very moment, the actual second, that I take over office control of the program. Dan, get out of there.
Goodbye.
Next week, folks.
Wait. He said he was going to take over office control.
He's going to take over control of everything, including
He gets the office. He gets the office. He gets the control room.
Everything.
We have to.
We get a dark room with linoleum,
and we have to audition. You know, to get a spot on Olio Radio.
So as you can see, Jeremiah, that actually was not the moment. This is the moment. Say it again.
Olio.
All right. Well,
wait a minute. I'm not done.
Well, you're hanging on to your last moments, aren't you?
Olio Radio. It
like
sounds
a drowning man.
It rhymes.
We're stepping out on a slippery slope.
Yes. Please, somebody shut his microphone off.
No. Let me get a free dumb look from this kid here. Remember when we used to get that package of Olio and there was a red dot in the middle?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you had to push the red dot
and mix it
to make your
margarine.
To make your butter yellow. So, okay, Olio Radio.
Yellow.
Good job, kid.
All right.
Okay, Jeremiah, you push the button.
Apparently, well.
Okay, say the control moment again now. The line.
Perfect.
Go for it.
We just did.
No, I say it so everyone can hear it.
All right, well, perfect. And now is the very moment, the actual second that I take over office control of the program. Again, Dan, get out of there.
All right.
Next week, folks, tune in to hear Olio Radio of the Ozarks.
Are you ready to go, Kent?
Saddle up, partner. And folks, thanks for tuning in.
Yep. Until next week. Adios.
The Ozark Harvest Radio Hour is a production of the Eureka Springs Independent and the Inside Straight and Thanatopsis Club. Richard Pille, executive producer. Dan Krotz, producer and writer. Dr. Sharon Sloan, technical director. Dr. Fred Mayer, director of music. G.K. Chesterton, director of philosophy and content. Jane Pille and Bonifaci Fiacre, gardening consultants. Luca Brazzi, aquaculture consultant. Eddie Keever and the fabulous Keever sisters, advertising and sales. The Ozark Harvest Radio Hour is organic radio, always fresh, always local, and always honest. We are community radio. That means that if you would like to appear on the Ozark Harvest Radio Hour, we have to put you on. Contact us at the OzarkHarvestRadioHour.com, like us on Facebook, or look us up in the telephone book. Until next week, so long, and be nice.
1, 2, 3, 4.